The Ministry of the Environment of Chile, together with the KliK Foundation, are pleased to host an official side event this year's SB62 in Bonn. The event will explore the importance of well-coordinated interaction between national carbon market frameworks and domestic policy carbon pricing instruments for a good and functional implementation under the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. You can look forward to gaining insights and information from countries that already have their carbon market framework in place.
So I would like to introduce our distinguished panelists with this. We have joining online Ms. Cristina Figueroa Vargas from the Ministry of Medio Ambiente in Chile. We have Ms. Jimena Mora from MINAM in Peru, so the Ministry of Environment. We have Dr. Daniel Benefo from the CMO in Ghana, and Dr. Jörg Grütter, also joining online as a private company from Seroca. And we have then at the end Mr. Joachim Sell from the KliK Foundation as well, and Martin Stadelmann from the Federal Office, the Swiss Federal Office of Environment. To start with, I would like to start with Cristina. She is the Carbon Pricing and Carbon Markets Coordinator at the Ministry of Environment and Article 6.4 TNA Forum Chair in Chile. In this role, she's in charge to develop for the development of regulation and implementation of carbon market-related instruments and under the framework law on climate. And with this, before we start, of course, we thought about what questions we want to know and what we want to understand. And we know that Chile has passed a law on climate change in 2022. And Chile set for 2050 targets for greenhouse gas neutrality and climate resilience. Carbon markets will play a key role in achieving these targets. Now, what we would like to understand from her is how did you approach this, and what are the key success factors in developing national regulations for the implementation and use of international carbon markets? So I pass the mic on to Cristina. Thank you and welcome. Maybe we use this time and until we get technical assistance and pass the word to Jimena Mora. So very quickly, let me introduce her then, and we skip on afterwards to Cristina. So Jimena is the director of the Greenhouse Gas Mitigation Directorate at the Ministry of Environment in Peru. She is an industrial engineer with a master's degree focused on environment and development. She has more than 14 years of experience in climate change issues, mainly in the development of public policies for the inclusion of climate change and implementation of greenhouse gas mitigation projects. And also for her, we know that RENAMI, so the Peru's national framework for the carbon markets, has been enacted in early 2025 and has been fully operational. So we would like to know if she can explain the key structure and how you can regulate Article 6 through this registry.
Sure, thank you. Thank you and good afternoon, everybody. Okay, we have a short presentation. I think is going to be very helpful to answer these questions. Very good. Okay, perfect. So let me just start with an important remark that this is for Peru. We recognize the huge potential to be a part of the article, to be a part and implement the Article 6 of Paris Agreement. We see as an important catalyzed way to catalyze sustainable development projects, for sure. So, and for that we have developed this first the basis for all these projects. Next slide, please. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this journal. Okay, so I'm going to start with everything started with when we established our framework law on climate change. This was on 2018, sorry. And of course, the important thing here is that with this, with the law, established as our Ministry of Environment as the national authority on climate change, and also he was encouraged and indicated as the MINAN has to manage registers and accounts for GHG emissions, and also the GHG emission reduction and removals units as well. So a year after we deliver our regulations, and in this regulation we establish and we create RENAMI, what is it means National Registry Mitigation Actions from Peru, and we create this as a most relevant tool in MRB tool for our country. After it was actually we updated our NDC, and we expressed that we are very interested in participation on cooperative approaches on the Paris Agreement. Also, in that year, we signed our first bilateral agreement with Switzerland, of course. Then they conduct a lot of work in order to develop all the details from the from RENAMI's regulations. So we work on that, but the most important thing, and I would like to highlight in this moment, is that we conduct a national consultation with a multi-stakeholder consultation. This is very important because this allows us to set the safeguards for every single stakeholder and mainly the most important probably it will be safeguard for the indigenous people in Peru. Actually, this process was we conduct this process by 2022 and we finish until 2023. And last year, at the end, in November, in November of last year, we finally got the approval of the provision for the operation of RENAMI. And this, of course, this was the same moment. In parallel, the Article 6 rule book was finally finalized. So okay, and just to go to the end at this moment in 2025, sorry, we just signed it at the end of March our second bilateral agreement with Singapore, and we also start to operate to put in place all the RENAMI, our registry, right? So well, as you know, also this year we have to submit our NDC 3.0. It will be our second updated, and we will include it and we'll indicate that this will be, of course, at this moment Peru is ready to implement the Article 6 as well. Next slide, please. I'm going to go now. I'm going now some details about our provisions. In RENAMI, we established a process to registration and mitigation actions, and also to authorize the transfer of the emission reduction units. So it is important to establish that RENAMI has 6 administrative procedures on carbon market mitigation actions. And this is, as I mentioned before, related with the registration of the carbon market activities, and then with the registration of the emission reduction units. So it is important to say that for both registration, for both procedures, the registry establishes the ownership of each one. Right? So, of the activities and also from the reduction. So, next slide, please. Okay, next. So, So, and just a week ago, I think so, we just released the whole provisions, the entire RENAMI provisions for this operation of national. So in English and Spanish, because our original was only in Spanish, but now we have like the official translation. This is now you can if you scan this QR code, you can see in detail what our regulations this show can offer. In detail our regulation for each subject that we're gonna develop, and especially I think the most important. I don't want to go in detail for all the technical issues, but if you can go jump for the next slide. I think the most important thing here is to see the two administrative procedures and the cycle of mitigation activities. After the development of the carbon market mitigation activity, of course, it comes the validation, and after that we have the first administrative procedure, and the second one is after the registry of the Euro or the emission reduction units. We can go for the next slide, please. And well, we have two categories for RENAMI. We have two categories. It's RENAMI is focused on carbon market mitigation activities under cooperative approaches, but also voluntary carbon market mitigation activities. I would like to highlight here that the registration for cooperative approaches, it was RENAMI authorized them, and also well, the euros can be used at ITMOS as well. And for the carbon markets, voluntary carbon markets is will be RENAMI recognized them by the Peruvian government. And just to finish it, I think it's very important that we, next slide please, that for our registry we have to recognize the certification standards and also the methodologies, and so far we have been delivered the recognizing of two certification standards called standards and BCS from BERA, and so far we have to recognize 9 methodology focuses and for example water management for practicing rice and reforestation and activities in reforestation and also for degradation and reducing emission from the deforestation and degradation, industry, agriculture, and for sure, and destruction of the ocean depleting substance as well. And just allow me to finish with this one, with the last one. Okay, I'm gonna provide some remarks here. What was important for us during this journey, during this process and the last year, as we consider that it's very, very important to prioritize the promote of multilateralism and climate action, and specifically in cooperative approaches. As I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, we see it as a huge, a lot of opportunities to promote important development projects here, and also generating this. Well, for sure, for us was generating this national regulation framework was very challenging. So for sure, we consider the pressure of time and the expectation of the different developers and our country. But it's a learning process still. But it's very important for us to deliver as strongly because we consider this is need to transmit be transparency for the developers, to transmit them that there is no risk and the legal certainty for the investment for sure, and to just okay, of course promoting this environmental integrity carbon market. Also, as I mentioned at the beginning, is capitalizing in more than 20 years of international experience, the habits that we have seen here. So I'm gonna end like this. I think I'm running out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jimena, so much. So I have the challenge as a moderator to keep the time. And of course, sitting here is a bit of a challenge with the sign, right? So we try again with shifting it. Exactly. Andrea is also trying to keep that time to catch up a little bit and that we can all finish on time. We try again now with the technicalities. Does it work now? Let's see if we can hear Christina now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, now it works. Thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the patience. And I'm really apologize for not being there. We'll try to follow the 8 minutes we have and be really brief about our teaching experience in terms of policy and how actually the Switzerland cooperative approach has helped us to reach some of our finally requirements, or how you say it, like achievement between our experiences. So I will start first with our context and our implementation. Next. Next speak. Okay, just to make a brief summary, we have our climate change framework law that was published in 2022 and give you a really clear pathway in how to finally comply with our NDC. It's a multi-year target NDC and has a national mitigation goal and also a carbon budget, a national carbon budget. And it's mainly recognized, of course, recognized Article 6, and is directly related with our long-term strategy. In our long-term strategy, we established this national budget, we split it in sectoral carbon budget, and for comply with those sectoral carbon budget, every sectoral ministry needs to establish a mitigation sectoral plan when they define measures that will help them to finally reach this goal. So reach the goal of the sectoral carbon budget and finally our NDC. So a lot of different authorities and actors that are involved in how we finally reach our NDC. Next, please. In the process of implementing Article 6, Chile has a lot of things that we had from before our national framework regulation and that will help us for the future. I always say that Article 6 is directly related with transparency, and in that case, we already have some interministerial work on data collection with the national prospective system and our national inventory system, facilitating reporting, evaluation of assessment of methodologies, or for determine what typology of activities will go further or beyond our NDC. Also, we have the experience of national carbon instruments like the green tax and its offsetting system, because they help us to understand what could be more cost-effective measures to maintain a national level and how the national implementation is, for example, registry, barriers, things that we need to learn from. And then we have the Article 6 work that we have done in advance. The Ministry of Environment in 2020 has established an Article 6 national task force that now is led by the Ministry of Environment, but is the base for us to have a governance that will be finally the new National Article 6 committee that will take decision about what goes beyond our NDC or not, and help us to find about methodologies, about agreements, and we already have a kind of a governance before starting the creating our national framework and finally implementation. Also, to understand how to make the national framework, we did a public and private roundtable with more than 50 participants or stakeholders that had already experience in carbon market in Chile to understand their point of view of what they expect from our national framework. We already have bilateral agreements. I will say that our bilateral agreement with Switzerland help us a lot to understand how it could be a cooperative approach, what we need to define, what are the important things we need to put on, and in this case also help us to establish our national framework. I think it's a really good example of learning by doing. And of course, we also have already some work on defining some activity typology lists and what is important to define these, what considerations we need to take. So help us to move forward with the ministry that are involved. They already know, or they already know Article 6. And finally, we have the approval from the Council of Ministry of the Sustainability and Climate Change Council of our Article 6 national framework law, and going through the last part on the controller, so it's going to be published, I hope soon. Next. So considering all this experience, I think the implementation of the Article 6 in Chile needs to have like really 4 big pillars. One, as I already mentioned, is transparency. They have some interministerial work for reporting to understand each other, to see how we go to reach NDC, what will be beyond our NDC, how we are going to finally comply, even with the corresponding adjustment, how we are going to do that. So it really needs to be connected. Also frameworks, that you cannot take decisions about Article 6 without a framework behind. As already we have seen, at least Peru have the experience with the registry, with the RENAME, and we have now the experience with our Article 6 national framework that established criteria for activities that will go beyond our NDC. We haven't defined a list of activities now, but we are working more in the term of defining criteria of how you can fix or not in these ones, because even we know that Article 6 is for beyond our NDC, and we cannot stop private sector of have ideas. So if we are going to have some main topics of what we believe could be a prioritization of an activity in this list, but also leaving the door open. If you think you fulfill some of these criteria, you could also apply and justify how you comply with this, and we are going to assess that. Create also infrastructure, procedures, and governance clear to know how to finally we are going to work out on this. Governance completely seen in directly relation of interministerial work for decisions about mitigation measures for the NDC, what goes beyond, how we are going to authorize, are you allowed to do a corresponding adjustment, it's going to be reflected in the national inventory. Is that important? At least in our case, due to the sectoral carbon budget, we have some responsibilities, and if the sectoral ministries don't comply with those, they need to pay a fee. So it's a really huge responsibility. And infrastructure, but not seen only from registry, also seen about our national capacities. At least Sudan has been one huge important milestone in our case, because we are now starting to assess what is the main letter of interest, what we need to check in methodologies for say, okay, we can assess this authorization of activity, and also the document design, all that, and start to create national guidelines, national procedures for the assessment of these kinds of stations, and national registries and platforms that allow us, of course, for tracking.
Christina, sorry, 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. Next. In this case, only really brief, this is how we see the additionality to the NDC now of the project, like it's out of the NDC scope, advanced a measure that is already NDC but established in some mitigation sectoral plan, and also the C is really more complex but requires more analysis, and in this case it is in the NDC but has really high barriers for the sectoral authority, and we think with Article 6 we can do a policy mix between national and international instruments, and finally helps to trigger these kind of activities at national level. Next. So to finish, In case of the implementation with certain cooperation approach, we already have like 18 prior considerations and 13 letters of interest, 2 activities that request authorization, and we already are working on defining an admissibility check for the electromobility and the diesel to biomass boiler replacement. And we really highlight the learning by doing process. Like understand now in the situation that we need to take decisions, how to prioritize the mitigation activities is really important. And also this bilateral cooperation that help us to understand even between FOEN and the Ministry of Environment Chile, how we assess, how we analyze methodologies, is a learning by doing process but together. And better understand also how environmental integrity should be assessed, environmental social safeguards. And in this case, how we are going to reach hanging, sorry for the wrong typing here, hanging fruit activity with updated and new methodologies. This kind of agreements, instead of homologation from a standard that already exists, also help us to think or give the opportunity to projects that are not with a methodology already approved or need update to go through the process of Article 6. This is really important for Chile because we have experienced we have a lot of experience in carbon markets, and mainly the methodologies that are in standards are already part of our national carbon markets or our baseline. So to go beyond our NDC, sometimes we need to give the opportunity to projects that need to use or finally establish new methodologies to go to carbon markets, and this has been really a good experience. We have an circular economy project that is really promise a lot, and it's because of this alternative. And of course, always have in mind that you can do a policy mix. We know that as host countries we have the challenge that in some cases you don't know how it will be done or not, but you can mix it and maybe create an environment of policy mix that help us to finally reach the NDC. Challenges important with this, create a standard needs and procedures for the governments and capacity building. So thank you. Yeah, that is the last slide.
Thank you very much, Christina. And this job is really hard, keeping time. Huh? So we need to try better and be a bit more forceful. So let me introduce you our next panelist, who's also joining online. He's Dr. Daniel Tutubenefo, Head of Carbon Market Office in Ghana. He's worked at the Ghana Environmental Protection Agency for over 20 years. He's a CMO, was founded as part of the development of Ghana's climate protection strategy and part of Ghana's Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation.
How are you all? I hope you're fine. I'm sorry for not being there physically. I think in the interest of time, I'll just summarize our experience in 3 ways or 4 ways. First of all, I want to say that you realize that national frameworks performs about 3 or 4 functions. I think 4 functions. The first function, I think, for national frameworks is to clearly communicate the intention of the host country in how to domesticate the requirement of Article 6. Right, so for me, that's the first part. And all the decisions in 2CMA3 and 4C and 6CMA4, all those requirements that are communicated globally, to us, the national frameworks are the best vehicle for communicating that. Number 2, it is also the best vehicle to operationalizing the policy mix that is available in the country, both carbon pricing instruments as well as carbon crediting solutions in helping to achieve the NDCs and the long-term plan. So for me, the national frameworks offer the platform to provide a good mix for that domestic policy as far as the role of Article 6. Number 3, it is also a way to indicate the priorities of the country in giving birth to a bilateral agreement or a cooperative approach. what the country expects and the country's position in negotiating a bilateral agreement that is standardized across board. I mean, for example, in the case of Ghana, we have about five bilateral agreements. We have to ensure that all the agreements are treated at least with a minimum requirement. And you can find that requirement in most cases in the national frameworks. Number four, the national frameworks, in our view, is also the best way of engaging and communicating to the project architects. Requirements, processes are best communicated, and fees and charges are best communicated in national frameworks to the architects, including what is eligible and what is not eligible. Number five, I think the last one, national frameworks is also the best possible way of ensuring that the responsibility of the host country is clearly articulated. So that's, in our view, the first role of national framework. The next point I want to make, which is my last but one point, is that does the national framework itself lead to implementation? It does not. From what we've learned that national frameworks, as they look like, has to move from a policy to becoming a law, and having a law backing the national framework further strengthens its implementation in the country and also give clarity to the actors. So we've learned that national framework has to move from being a policy framework document to becoming a legally binding requirement that provides confidence and transparency in the country. Would that lead to investment on the ground? No. So in our view, it is not enough only to have national frameworks. It is important to use the national framework as an enabling system or framework that would lead to investment. And in our view, that investment is Article 6, and therefore we have to ensure that the national frameworks are so much enabling enough to be able to bring in investment. And therefore it's important that it has to be backed with investment. Last point, and that will be all. And I think my previous colleagues mentioned it. It's clear that one of the best experiences so far is about the fact that we are all in the same boat. And we have to learn by doing and sharing the experiences across board. And this platform for us provides us with a good opportunity for us to share our experience that you are not in this boat alone. Everybody is learning, and we learn by doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, after hearing from three governments, we move into the private sector, which is the opposite view of the receiving end. We have Jörg Rutter also joining us online. Jörg Rutter is the CEO of KliK Consulting and the director of Sevoca. He's been working for more than 30 years on linking sustainable transport to climate finance. He has structured and implemented more than 100 carbon credit projects in transport sector since early 90s and has been working on e-mobility projects since 2008 in more than 40 countries. Now, what we would be interested here, Jörg, is to see, I mean, if you can explain the type of projects that you have in several partner countries with Switzerland, such as Chile, Peru, and Uruguay, and how are these Article 6 activity structures, and how do you see differences and challenges in participating in country-specific implementation of the carbon markets? Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea, and good day, everybody. Basically, the programs we are structuring on e-mobility are a program of activities, which means that you put together different vehicle categories, all of them battery electric vehicles, such as trucks, vans, buses, but also mobile machinery. We have just recently passed through a new methodology revision by the VCS, which includes also for electric mobility mobile machinery or vessels. So, and also charging infrastructure, so it includes all components of electric mobility. And through that, it enables also smaller companies to participate, which just have 2 or 3 trucks. It includes not only operating companies, but also leasing companies or other companies involved in this field. By putting this together, you enable different sizes of companies, but you also reduce drastically the transaction costs because you can make the programs larger. and through that, a larger amount of the money actually goes to the investor and doesn't remain in between. Now, the challenges we see with this Article 6 and the countries involved are not that different from the challenges you always had in carbon markets, and which are one of the major reasons why the transport sector hasn't really been involved very much, let's say in the CDM, but also in the voluntary markets. It's that the transaction costs tend to be too high because of a higher complexity you're doing from the project itself, but also from the governments. What we see as one of the core issues is that there is a lack of clarity what actually can be included in an Article 6 program and what cannot be included. And then it takes a very long time and very long discussions to decide on that. 2030 is very close. You're making investments in this field which have a commercial lifespan of 8, 10, 12 years. And if you take a very long time to decide on what you want to approve to be included and what cannot be included, then it simply gets too late for an investor to actually warrant to do anything in this area. So it would be very helpful. I understand the concept of learning by doing, but if the concept of learning by doing means that you take 12 months for the authorization of a program, or that it means that you review approved methodologies again and again, then this creates a problem. I think it is much easier to actually get programs running if you do it like India did, where you state you have a positive or a negative list and say these activities can be used for Article 6 and these activities cannot be used for Article 6. This makes it clear, and then you can go forward in this process. If you don't have that clarity, then you enter a program and then you hope that it will be approved. You follow registered methodologies, but it's again the same, I would say the same errors like in the CDM. You have a validator, they look at the program, they give your comments, and now instead of a registry body, you have two governments who again review it from the start and take all the time they want for this process, which I agree they have this time, but this prevents at the end investments in this area. And I think that's the major challenge we are facing. The other challenge is also that emissions reductions you can't measure. You can measure project emissions, that should be clear in the meanwhile, but it's still not clear. You can measure project emissions, you cannot measure the baseline. So it's always an approximation you're having in emission reduction determination. Now, instead of trying to make it more and more sophisticated, the measurements involved, a simple procedure would simply be to keep it like you're having in the methodology, and to state that we take away 10% or 20% of the potential emission reductions you're actually generating and keep it on the national balance. And have a simple rule, have a simple process, a transparent process, and don't try to reinvent the wheel. That's the major messages I would like to convene.
Thank you so much. We move on now to Joachim Sell. He started as my colleague as Director Carbon Procurement at the KliK Foundation in December 2023. He's in charge of sourcing, developing and contracting ICMOS under Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement. And before joining the KliK Foundation, he's worked over 20 years to develop novel private sector and governmental mitigation programs under a variety of carbon standards and cooperative approaches such as Article 6.2, CDM or VERA. Now, what we of course, sorry, before you start, because what we would be interested is, like, we as a KliK Foundation, we operate in 14 countries that have signed bilateral climate agreements with Switzerland, And we would like to hear from your experience at the KliK Foundation and what we gain from working in countries which have the national framework for Article 6 already in place.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrea, and hi to everybody. It's a big pleasure to be here. These are the countries that already come with a bilateral agreement in place with Switzerland, currently 14 countries. By the way, the list, I think, that you see here on the right side of the map is the lists in order of when those agreements were signed. So the first one was actually with Peru, and then Kenya, I think it was only a few weeks ago, when I'm not mistaken. And I do know there's more discussions ongoing, some of them more explorative and less advanced, some probably more advanced. So these agreements actually provide a basis, or I would say the guidance for the whole process, from early stage mitigation activity, idea notes, net development, validation, and so on, up to authorization, and then later the transfer of the ITMOs and the recognition of the transfer at the end, and the corresponding adjustments. So it's a very important base, and I was very glad to see, for example, in the framework of Chile, that they base a lot of the processes and responsibilities probably already on the bilateral agreement that was in place with Switzerland. Then, just for you to have an idea, we currently have roughly 60 mitigation activities under development. Under development means that they're developing their MAD, they're in validation. About 20 have already requested authorization, many of which are still pending. And then we count probably with a little bit more than 22 MOPAs. And those last two figures, the 20 requests for authorization and the 22 MOPAs, they should increase substantially still this year, because we need to speed up the process. Next slide, please. So let's first begin with the challenges. Some of them have already been mentioned. Jörg mentioned the time it sometimes takes for the authorization still. Maybe that's also not that surprising in the initial 1 or 2 years, but then in the future, these timelines need to go substantially down to make these projects viable. The tricky thing is, and that also has been mentioned, that this is highly complex projects or programs. For those of you that have been working in the early years of CDM, like 2006 up to 2008, 9, or 10, it's not easier than that, especially because the transferring countries, and in our case, Switzerland's government, also deeply involved, and obviously also have to evaluate the mitigation activities, in some cases by law. Usually, I like to depict the mitigation activities and organize them in 3 working streams that usually run completely in parallel, or hopefully they run in parallel to save time. One is the implementation, starting with feasibility studies often, and then securing the finance, and then build a plant or implement the project physically, and then operate it in the long term. This is the stream that is mainly in the hands of the project owners in most cases, and they're acquainted with that. It's in their sector, they have done similar things before, and they know how to assess the risks associated to it. Then there's the contracting part, which is between KliK and then the project owner, based on a business model for each of the activity. We, together with the project owner, determine the price and the volume that then forms part in the term sheet, and later the mitigation outcome purchase agreement, the MOPA. This is also not so weird for project owners, something they know. Many of them have contracts in place, some of them have PPAs in place, power purchase agreements, sorry. And the MOPA is not that different from a PPA, for example. But then there's this carbon cycle, and that's the tricky part for the project owners usually, because it tends to be a black box, at least in some of the process steps that they need to engage in. For the MAD development, they could hire a renowned carbon consultant. They often do. We recommend that in most cases, and agree with the carbon consultant to write a MAD in, let's say, 3 months. Similar validation, you hire a VBB, and you can ask the VBB to not take more than 3 months. But then when it comes to authorization, you cannot hire a government and ask it to authorize within 3 months. And this is a little bit currently the problem, that the authorizations, at least in this initial years, they tend to take a long time. It's completely a black box for project owners, and we have several. Let's say I'm only gonna invest into the project once I have the authorizations, which is okay if an authorization takes 2 to 3 months. But as Jörg already mentioned, in some cases it has been 12 months, and that's way too long. We don't have time for this, and that's why I would like to highlight a little bit success factors that usually have to do with efficiency and gaining time. That's absolutely key. A robust and clear framework, as was presented from Christina, that helps to gain that time and to build certainty. With a definition of the responsibilities, who is involved in decision making to authorize mitigation activity. Is it like bilateral? In Chile it would be the environmental Ministry for Environment, and when it comes to battery energy storage systems, would be together with the Ministry of Energy. If it's about electromobility, with the Ministry of Transport, and so on and so forth. And then, as Christina already mentioned, there's also something like a task force or interministerial commission that helps to take the decision. So I think these responsibilities and process steps are super important. Then, if possible, it helps a lot if these process steps can be managed in parallel and not sequentially. For example, if I can ask for an improvement of a methodology and for an authorization of a MAT and for the registration of the project owner all in one package, then that helps a lot compared to when I first need to approve the methodology as it used to be in CDM, and only then I can actually author my MAT and ask for the authorization. So parallel process steps help a lot. Then it was already mentioned, we'll not go into details, wide list of technologies, give a lot of orientation or prioritization of technologies help, and the same with the approved methodologies. Often it's the simplest if CDM, Vera, and gold standard methodologies that just per se already approved and don't need to go through the cycle again. Then one point I would like to draw your attention to is that when a framework is actually decided about and is finished, then it can still take a long time until it enters into force, because it might need the signature of a president of a country. And we have seen that that led a little bit to paralyze the whole process of authorization, because unless it was in place, nobody was allowed to take a decision or could not take a decision. And there it could make sense to include transition clauses in the framework or interim solutions that still allows you to authorize even when that final signature is not in place yet. And then again, absolutely key is to increase the efficiency, to bring those timelines down. What we have done in Chile, which Christina also already mentioned, we have done workshops, preparatory workshops with the Ministry of Environment, Energy, project developers and project owners on the crunch issues of important technologies. For example, Chile, electromobility is important, but also battery energy storage systems. There we discussed methodological matters, like how do we calculate the grid emission factor in Chile, and how do we make that a standardized approach, and not that every project does it in its own way. How do we treat the additionality that is a little bit tricky with these types of projects? And then obviously we also try to increase the efficiency by replicating projects that have already gone through this whole process. So in few words, timing is absolutely key. At KliK we strive to communicate a lot with the governments. Both governments actually did similar workshops also with Bonn, and we try to standardize our templates for the MAC, for the business model, and so on. And by this, hopefully, we can bring those times down to a reasonable and adequate level. So I'll leave it with that.
Thank you, Joachim. So we move to our last panelist, is Martin Stadelmann. He's a senior policy advisor in the International Division of the Swiss Federal Office of the Environment. He served as an IPCC contributing author, and before joining the Swiss government, he was executive director for climate advisory and climate investment at South Pole. Now, one of the key questions we would like to understand from you, Martin, is Switzerland's national framework on climate change includes commitments under the Paris Agreement that are partly achieved by the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Could you please elaborate on the experience of the implementation and what are the lessons learned?
Okay, thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you, KliK, for inviting me. Thank you for covering Chile. It's a really great pleasure to be here next to colleagues from Peru, Chile, and also Ghana. You're all very important partner countries for us under bilateral agreements, bilateral cooperation under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Thank you. It was a great pleasure to hear about your lessons, and I think I heard twice from you. It's about learning by doing. We would agree. It's important we start early and we learn, and it's also about exchanging lessons learned. So I'm happy to share today our experiences in implementing the agreements. And I tried to summarize them in a few important points. So I think one important point for us is the implementation almost already starts with the negotiating the agreement. So it's very key to already clarify a few key elements when you negotiate the agreement. So I mean, you mentioned high integrity, environmental integrity, and that's a really key principle for us. We already solidify in the text. We also clarify this is about high ambition action, right? We together want through Article 6 to increase global mitigation ambition together. And also for us a key principle is that we have authorizations early on in the process to guarantee investment certainty. You know, I remember Chile, it was a lengthy discussion how to align the frameworks, and I think it was important that we clarified we have authorization of mitigation activities early on. And I think the time we spent back then is now working well in our favor as it helps us for the implementation. So first learning, already the cooperation starts with implementation with the negotiation. The second point is, I think we learned from all three speakers that it's always very complex to set up these new processes and frameworks, and it takes time. So what we are learning is we encourage our partners to start developing these processes early on, already during the negotiation, as we want obviously then to move to action very quickly. And we also encourage to have an exchange on how we can make sure that the frameworks align with each other. Again, to also take up your point, right, that we later on don't have things to clarify and we are getting delayed. Let me move on, and I think also heard from Christina earlier on, the capacity building is important for you. It's also our lesson, right? So signing the agreement, we cannot just assume this will then go on. We learned it's important to build capacity. We do that both through a partner UNDP, but also we do it bilaterally, right? So we during the implementation we have a lot of exchange. We share our lessons. We'll also learn from others. I think we learned from all our 15 partners so far. So building capacity, let's not underestimate that, and let's invest in that. It also is of the benefit not just for ourselves bilaterally, also globally, right? So we already now we see other countries like Norway, Sweden, other countries benefiting from our capacity institution built, and we already benefit from others. So let's continue like that. Now, agreement is only the first step, right? Then comes authorization, and we know how difficult it is to get first authorization in the country. So we learned that it's very key to have very close coordination alignment between partner states to make sure we in the end really authorize the same thing and we agree on, yes, this is a project with high integrity contributes to sustainable development. So close coordination is key. And it's also important to really invest time in this first authorization, because the first one is very difficult and takes time. Obviously, we will see that in many countries, but then we learned that the second or the third authorization is much easier because you have established processes, you have learned how to work with each other. And I think Ghana, I mean, Daniel here on the call is a good example. I think Ghana is really on a good path to authorize many activities. And it's the same for us, right? Obviously now we learn and get faster, hopefully even faster in the future. Now, let me think about other learning on authorization. Maybe the key one, I'm sorry, I just repeat that. Unfortunately, a bit for us after the Baku decision on Article 6.4, we see a bit the trend for countries to move the authorization to a later stage of the project cycle. To say, okay, we do it once, we have the verification reports, and then we do authorization. But for us, we see this as a substantial issue as it creates investment uncertainty, right? For investors, it's super key that they know when they face the investment decision that they get this authorization. They know money will flow. Else, I was working a long time in the private sector. If you take investment decision, it's very key. You're doing your analysis. It's a huge risk if you don't have this authorization early on. So we spend currently a lot of time in bilateral conversations with particular new partners to make sure the frameworks are aligned and we get authorization early on. This is, I think, an issue overall for Article 6 currently. I think your partner countries here from Chile, Peru, and also Ghana, I think may work in your benefit because you have frameworks aligned with our frameworks. You do authorization early on, so maybe you will see more investments because others are not yet there. But we obviously hope that as many countries as possible will move authorization early on. Okay, let me lastly come to first transfers, right? So it's the first step after agreements, then authorization, we come to the actual transfer. And as you know, we have been involved in the first transfer between Thailand and Switzerland 3 years ago, so obviously a few lessons. Similar to authorization, first transfer is super important for capacity building and establishing processes. So we shouldn't underestimate how much time it takes, but once we have it there, we have a framework that is helping for the future. We're actually now close to the second first transfer with another country. But unfortunately, also, a first transfer is not a silver bullet, so you cannot assume just because you have a first transfer, then everything else will follow. So the work continues, right? You have to drive action together. You have to make sure, monitoring verification reports get in, that you can act fast to make a transfer happen. On first transfers, maybe our last lesson is, or last insight is that for us, we have now spent quite some time, a lot of work investing in first transfers on emission reductions with partners like the three we have here on the table. But going forward, for us in Switzerland, we also have a strong interest in first transfers or transfers on carbon dioxide removals. And why is that? We moved to a net zero goal by 2050, and we want to go earlier, and we can only achieve that with carbon dioxide removals. So we already predict in the future the market will move more to a carbon dioxide removal market. And learning from other experiences, we have to go early, learn, and then continue. That's why I'm so happy we just signed our 15th agreement with Norway last week. And it's not just an agreement on carbon dioxide removal in Article 6, it's also next to it we announced 10 companies announced pilot transfer, of it most so private companies through voluntary contributions. And we see this as a really important step in the global climate market, that we're also focusing on removals and getting transfers done there. To summarize and to wrap up, I think we all have important lessons to share in Article 6.2. All of us, authorizations, agreements, transfers. Let's continue to work forward to find the best ways how we can improve processes and alignment, hopefully also to speed up things over time. Together we can scale mitigation, action, and implementation together through Article 6. We're looking forward to expand the collaboration with all our partners here, as with the other 15 partners we have signed agreements. We need all hands on deck to scale global mitigation action and to make net zero world happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. So I see we have 2 minutes left maybe, and then we need to close sharply. I'm not sure if we can offer the opportunity for one question, and then we need to close. I'm sorry that we have delays and need to close, go short on it.
So
just pass this on. Maybe we have one short here. If you're short, then we can have us.
I work on the Article 6 implementation for a big government in the Arab world. Maura, you made a list of all the methodologies you approved. You pre-approved these methodologies. What is your issue with private registries? Does a project proponent need to register under Vera or Gold Standard, or is it possible just to use methodology?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Well, our review and recognize of the method of standards and methodology is a continued process. We just started with with Gold Standard and Vera, but with a group of methodologies, but we still have more work to do in the coming months, because we are trying to well, of course, see what kind of the projects are in the pipeline and try to respond with the on time
It's about double registration. Does the project proponent need to register with Gold Standard in parallel?
Yeah, but for us, it's in Peru. We think that it must be. We believe in a centralized registry, and that's the RENAMI it is, and the one.
Only one registration with you and not with Vera.
Yes,
That's right.
okay. I'm forced to close the event. I'm really sorry, Axel. I'm sure we can take it up. Maybe if people want to exchange, we're certainly here. But we know also that people have tight schedules, and so thank you very much for participating, especially to the panelists, also online. And have a nice day.